we are going to head right into the next presentation. Mr. Curt is on deck. And I'm just going to get his PowerPoint queued up. So I can introduce Mr. Coyte's the Deputy Undersecretary for Economic Development. Our paths kind of crossed very tangentially. College Recruiter has done some work with the VA, and it was brought to our attention that the VA has a partnership program where, I mean, in a real nutshell, we will send the job postings that are running on our site to the VA to help them make them more easily available to veterans who are perhaps transitioning or perhaps have been out of service for years. I get an email, I think it's about once a month or so. I don't know if you're personally writing those or if a member you are, okay. So when the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out its hiring report, and you know, we added 300 and something thousand jobs last month, you know, go team. Then I'll get an email, usually, 2 hours later, something like that. It's like, here's what the BLS said, and here's how that translates for the veterans. And so I see his name in my inbox quite frequently. So Mr. Coyte's going to talk for a little while. And did you want the handheld? Is that? Okay.
I'll do it any way you want. I'm easy. I think that's still good. Thanks for inviting me. When I heard that I'm an old college professor guy, so I tend to wander, so please excuse that. When I got the opportunity to talk to a bunch of government HR professionals, I said, yeah, this is a good opportunity, and this is what my staff put together in terms of my talking points. And this is what I put together in terms of my talking points. And so that's what I want to do, is I want to talk to you a little bit about that. First, I want to acknowledge my good friend, Colonel Rock, down here in the front row. You're going to hear from him pretty soon, but we have become partners in crime, if you will, in talking about hiring veterans. And that's what I'm certainly here to talk about. Let me give you a little bit of background to give you a perspective. I am a 24-year Navy veteran. I got out of the Navy in 1994, which is a long time ago. And I've been doing this probably longer than I did the Navy stuff. I worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers for about 7 years. Was then hired by Donna Shalala at HHS as a senior executive, and was there for about 12 years or so. And I can tell you the interesting story on how I got hired there. Basically, very quickly, my client, who was at the CIA, and it was interesting to hear Todd talk about polygraphs at the CIA. They are somewhat terrifying, I'll just tell you that right up front. Another sea story that I could be happy to tell you about. But my client at the CIA said, I got this great job that you should apply for because you'd be ideal for it. I said, yeah, it's not going to happen. And he jumped on me and abused me until I finally said, okay, I did. I applied. 4 months later, I get a phone call saying, hey, we had all these hundreds of applicants, and we've skinnied it down to 5 or 6, and you're one of them. And I said, well, for what? And they reminded me what I had applied for 4 months earlier. And long story short, I went in, interviewed with this panel, got through that. I went home, and my wife said, how'd that interview thing go? And I said, no way they're going to hire me. I just got done telling them their children were ugly. Interestingly, the Secretary of HHS called me, about a week or so later. Not the Secretary themselves, the Secretary's Secretary actually called me. And so, Secretary wants to meet with you, blah, blah, blah. I go in, and same story. She asked me all these questions, and I told her how ugly the government was and how ugly all her children were. And I was convinced that I wouldn't get the job, and sure enough, I ended up getting the job, and they offered it to me. The other small story is the Deputy Secretary called and made the offer, And I said, sure, if you just send that over in writing, I'd certainly appreciate it. And as you probably well know, we don't do official letters of offers and so on and so forth. Everybody's expected to just get them. So let me tell you a little bit about what we do at VA. As Steve said, I'm the Deputy Undersecretary for Economic Opportunity. So what does that mean? It means I have all of the GI Bill, all education programs. I have vocational rehabilitation and employment for wounded warriors and veterans, or disabled veterans. I have the VA Home Loan Program, which is the zero money down. Anybody's familiar with that and have heard of that, along with specially adapted housing grants. I have the Transition Assistance Program for all transitioning service members to become veterans, if you will, and all employment-related issues for veterans. So a pretty full plate, but you can imagine the synergies that go along with that. For example, we developed, and we've been working really, really hard to develop really good tools in the world of education. Post 9/11 GI Bill. How many of you are familiar with post 9/11 GI Bill? A good chunk of you, so I won't go through that. We spent, in the first 5 years of post 9/11 GI Bill, $45 billion. We have sent over 1.2 million folks to school. Pretty powerful. The post 9/11 GI Bill is not about just higher education, it's also about the full gamut of any and all technical issues. So keep that in mind, because I'm going to remind you about that in a minute. And so that's what the Office of Economic Opportunity does, is you can see the synergies amongst all of those things. The tools in education, we're doing a lot. We just released this year a thing called the GI Bill Comparison Tool. I encourage you to take a look at it, particularly if you have any kids that are thinking about going to college, because it's got a lot of veteran-centric stuff on there, but also has just other stuff on there. It's a tool that we combined over 17 disparate websites into one place, so you just click on a school and you kind of go from there and you get lots of good information about that school. We also have a feedback mechanism where students, veteran students, can submit a complaint against a school. You know, the school is grumpy at me about, you know, my tuition, or I'm getting ripped off, or I'm any number of things. Both of those tools were released this year. For the comparison tool, we've already had well over 400,000 visitors. The feedback tool, we've already had 45,000 people view the site, and over 2,000 complaints have been submitted. So you can see these are really neat tools. They're tools that since February of this year have had all of these visitors. Never once has it gone down. And the only complaint we get about the tools is we want more stuff on them. So it doesn't exactly normally sound like a government IT system, and most certainly doesn't sound like a bureaucratic VA IT system as well. So we're quite proud of that. So what I want to talk about a little bit is some of the things that Colonel Rock is going to talk about, and that's the Transition Assistance Program, so you all are familiar with that program. About 3 or 4 years ago, the President made a speech in the Washington Navy Yard, not too far away, and he required the DoD and VA to put together a task force to figure out this veteran employment thing. I was on that task force, and I was in the first meeting. And I like to tell the story that we had, of course, and later this task force, we included Department of Labor, the Small Business Administration, Department of Education, and we brought together many new partners. But I was there in the very first meeting. It was in the big conference room in VA, and all of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, they all came in. They had really cool uniforms, just like Colonel Rock here. And they were all flag officers, meaning they were all admirals or generals. And every single one of them was grumpy. And they were grumpy because the Marines were the biggest grumpies. And the Marine basically said, you know, my job is to fight wars, and why am I here? That was 3.5 years ago. Today, you're going to hear from Colonel Rock on a program called Soldier for Life. pretty impressive going from here to there. And it's one of those things that we like to tell people, particularly those our friends in DoD, is that you may be in the service for 3 or 4 or 5 years, even 20 years, maybe even 30 years, but you are a veteran for your life. And we are very charged up to make sure that our veterans have all of the tools necessary to be able to do that. So what does that mean to you all? Well, the fact of the matter is you've all heard of the, quote, drawdown. The DoD normally transitions about 250,000 people a year. That's just sort of regular numbers. The drawdown's going to bump that up to maybe 300K a year or so. That's all depends on budgets and decisions and lots of different things. But figure 250 to 300,000 folks a year are leaving the Department of Defense. Any idea on how much the Department of Defense spends on training its members? $17 billion a year. When you start looking at veterans, you are getting some of the most highly trained, highly educated people, period. Why is that important to you? Well, because over half of the hires in the federal government recently have been veterans. DoD is the highest number of veterans in their workforce, and they're about 46 or 47% of their civilian workforce are veterans. That's followed by VA, we're at 40 plus, and the reason we're not more is 300,000 of our 350,000 people who work at VA are doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals, and a lot of them are not veterans, as you might imagine. And but on the other part of the VA, we do that we do hire veterans. And so other agencies, I can give you those numbers, but they're most interesting. But what I want to talk to you as HR professionals is a little bit about what's going on with veterans, and in particular, and college degree veterans specifically. Unlike what Todd talked about, where in fact, a lot of the applicants are driven by the mission and so on and so forth, I will tell you that veterans are driven by a sense of service. Particularly those that we hire at VA, I often tell people, you can pretty much come up to any veteran in VA or any employee in VA and ask them what they do, and probably the likelihood they're going to say, I serve veterans. I do this at the Veterans Administration. Most other agencies, quite frankly, they'll say, oh, I'm a budget analyst, right? I'm a program analyst, I'm a blah, blah, whatever I am. But veterans are very, very service-oriented. An interesting quick C story. There was a program a couple years ago that we did. It's called the VRAP program, the Veterans Retraining Assistance Program. Long and short of it was for about 100,000 veterans. It provided unemployed veterans who didn't have any GI Bill benefits a year, up to 12 months of educational benefits in a high-demand field. The number one high-demand field that veterans went to was in the world of IT, some sort of IT-related thing. Number two was substance abuse and behavioral type counseling, because they wanted to give back to their communities. I would have never guessed that. I would have guessed automotive repair or something like that. And so part of that is veterans do have this sense of service. So I want you to make sure that you understand that. As HR professionals, I want to ask your cooperation and your help in the following. The government has programs like Pathways program. They have programs like recent graduate programs. And one of the things that we often hear about, I will also tell you that I do it as well, is everything's blocked by veterans. Right? Everything I get is blocked by veterans. And so, how do we deal with that? The fact of the matter is, the law is the law. That's number one, right? You're not going to get rid of veteran preference, right? You're not going to change it. So why not use it to your advantage? And here's what I mean. This morning, I pulled up 2 jobs. These aren't my talking points, so my staff is probably going crazy right now. USA jobs, right here. I gotta put my glasses on real quick. This job is for an emergency services dispatcher, GS7. And you go, okay, GS7? Here's what you gotta do to qualify for this job. You gotta have 1 year of experience, of qualifying experience at the GS6 level. You're going, okay, well, I got a sergeant, in the Army that has been doing stuff like this for, 15 years, 20 years. But using a qualifying experience is using correct response codes and terminology in dispatching and logging police and fire radio and telephone communications, operating police, fire, and security radios, fire and security alarms, closed circuit TV circuits, and the list goes on. Well, why would you put that kind of qualifying requiring information in a job announcement that basically is a GS7? And I will tell you, right up front, probably every single veteran that gets out of the service could do this job with probably about 2 hours of training. But we don't even let them qualify for this job because you, HR professionals, said that they got to do all these things. Here's another quick example. These are from this morning. I didn't make this up. Here's GS7. The job is a secretary. Secretary. You got to have 1 year of qualifying experience. Qualifying experience includes organizing and designing a filing system, making travel arrangements for conferences and meetings, locating and assembling information for various reports, and composing non-technical correspondence. Probably can be done by everybody in this room and probably by every departing service member coming out of DoD. My point here is that we often do it to ourselves. If anybody has seen, and I ask you, I beg you to go back to your offices this afternoon and go in and apply for a GS 5 or 6 job. Just do it. You'd be surprised, I did it this morning. Most jobs have this like 50 question thing in there. Right? You all laugh, but it's there. And it's got 4 answers, right? And one is never heard of it, can't read the question, to I'm an expert at this, right? And of course, if you don't answer expert in every one of these 50 or 80 questions that are there, then you're not qualified for the job because somebody else has already lied and said that they, are experts in all of this, right? And so what we need to do is help ourselves do this. And so if in fact you know that there are jobs that veterans are qualified for, then make them so and help them do that. I will tell you that a lot of us have seen this scenario where veterans have not only blocked things, but then we are, if you will, forced, required, call it whatever you want, to hire that veteran. My only response to you is that why not take what you know is obvious and turn it into a positive and find ways to leverage those veterans because you have an incredible person there to be able to help you. You have somebody who has leadership skills. You have someone who is service-oriented. You have someone who has a pocket likely full of benefits. They have the post 9/11 GI Bill. They have health care benefits. They may be also drawing compensation. or some other sort of benefit. They have a VA home loan program that requires no money down. Well, no money down on a $100,000 house, I'm trying to find one of those around here, on a $100,000 house is $20,000 that that veteran keeps in their pocket. A huge economic opportunity and impact for those veterans. So you have the opportunity to hire these folks. What are some of the tools? One of the most unique tools is the Veterans Employment Center. And so the Veterans Employment Center up until now has been principally all about private sector jobs. But I will tell you that every single job that is on USA Jobs is on the Veterans Employment Center. The Veterans Employment Center has 1.7 million jobs available to veterans. There's not even that many unemployed veterans. In fact, Stephen's note, here it is, that he got this on Friday, there are a total of 492,000 unemployed veterans, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And so, my point here is the Veterans Employment Center was launched, again, and I wish I was a techie guy at VA, because then I could take a lot more credit than I do. But the Veterans Employment Center was launched in April 23rd, and it was launched by both the First Lady and Second Lady. Since April, we have over 5,000 people on it. Over 5 million people have visited the site since April. Hasn't been broken once. The Veterans Employment Center has 2 or 3 cool features. Number one, it provides the opportunity for a veteran to establish a profile. Why is that important? Because then employers can go shopping. The biggest question I get is, hey, I want to hire veterans in the private sector. I want to hire veterans, how do I find them? Veterans Employment Center. There's also an opportunity on there for employers to make a public pledge or challenge of how many veterans they want to hire and within what time frame. We've all probably heard J.P. Morgan's chase 100,000 veterans, Walmart announcing that they're going to hire 100. It's on the Veterans Employment Center. And what it does is it does 2 things. Number one, it shows your commitment as an agency to hire veterans. It shows the progress, because it's self-reported, by your agency on how well you're doing against that goal. And it shows veterans that that's a place that I want to work because they are committed to hiring veterans. And so there are critically important things like that that we need to be thinking about. So I think I've gotten down to sort of the bottom of my handwritten page, and I want to leave just a few minutes for any questions that you may have. So I'll start taking questions. Yes, sir, right there, I guess. Because he's in the second row. The people in the way back, I'll call on you last, because you should have been coming down here to the front. Go ahead.
Undersecretary Coy, thank you for Rock for all.
I don't think Rock yet, because he hasn't spoken.
I understand that we're looking at some issues just to be honest
It was a little disturbing, in that if a veteran receives over $1,000 in pay, they would lose $2,100 out of $3,100 out of that program. Any thoughts on some of those policy changes that might be needed? And
So now, what's the question
the
again?
question is, what can we do about that? Is there something that we can do from a policy standpoint in terms of disabled veteran outreach? And secondly, is the VEC or Veterans Employment Center accessible through, we used to call it for vets, or pets for vets? Is there a URL or something?
It's on e-benefits.
And as you pointed out, 2 of our clients, in particular Walmart, UPS, collectively 180,000 looking to hire veterans. Well, what can federal agencies do to set up a memorandum of understanding or take advantage of the talent that's coming through for us?
I would recommend 2 or 3 things. First off is I would Each of your agency already has a hiring goal. I mean, you all have that, you get reported on, and somebody gets, a bonus or not a bonus by meeting it, and so on and so forth. So I'm not even suggesting that you do anything different other than publish your goal on the Veterans Employment Center. That's number one. Number two is I would strongly encourage, and we can help with this if you'd like, I would strongly encourage that HR professionals understand the benefits that veterans get. It's probably the biggest thing that we don't do as well. The new TAP program, which 3 years ago, the VA portion of the Transition Assistance Program for everybody getting out, 3 years ago it was optional, now it's mandatory. Secondly, it was 110 pages of a PowerPoint presentation that if you were very, very lucky, you would get a GS1 to read 110 pages to you during the course of about a 4-hour presentation. We had soldiers and sailors stabbing themselves with ballpoint pens just to get out of the lecture. It is now an interactive piece, and the Transition Assistance Program is now 5 days long. One of the issues that we need to get better at is teaching HR professionals in the federal government what those benefits are for veterans. I often tell people that if you think about benefits for veterans, it's kind of like the owner's manual that you get in a brand new car. How many of you actually read it cover to cover? You wait till one of the lights go off, and then you go in there and you open it, right? And what we need to do is get better at not waiting for the light to go off. That was a long answer to your question. Yes, sir. Ma'am.
Hi, my agency, we do use the Veterans Employment Center for pulling down resumes and profiling some veterans for hiring. But another approach that we've looked at doing is attending the TAC classes. So I've personally reached out to transition assistant program managers at the local installations to include the Pentagon here. But I unfortunately haven't been able to get any response back from them. We have identified positions that we would like to direct hire for veterans for. So I was looking for some advice and guidance on what.
Send me a note. Quite frankly, and Colonel Rocca will take care of it too. The reason I enjoy working with Colonel Rock is he's on the DoD side, so he can do lots of things to these soldiers and so on. On the VA side, we have to wait sort of until they get out the DoD door. And so we can help you out with that. We right now have veterans employment advisors at 106 bases across the country. We do transition assistance program classes every single week. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. Colonel Rock probably has them, but in terms of how many veterans we put through, send me a note and we'll get you connected. And that's curtis.coy@va.gov, so it's pretty simple. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Mr. Corey. My name is Jacqueline Bennett, and I'm with the Internal Revenue Service. And this is, okay, with...
I love IRS because they're getting probably as much headlines as VA gets now.
I wanted to add, I'm just want to say our concern. A lot of our managers, and we have veterans, and I work with the Veterans Coordinator and everything, but a lot of the managers, they think that, okay, a lot of persons try to attract millennials. What percentage of veterans are millennials? Because a lot of the managers think that most of the veterans are old people. Like, we're going to have a bunch of old college students on it. I'm not being real. I keep it real. And this is what they say.
Did she just call me old?
I'm old too, but that's what they think. They're like, we want like 22, 21-year-olds, and they have this mentality that we're going to have a bunch of old college students, or, I mean, I just keep it real. And so, I mean, what percentage of veterans are millennials? Because
Millennials are probably between 18 and 34, right?
Yeah.
I will tell you the unemployment numbers, that if you were on my list, you'd have it right here. The unemployment numbers of veterans between 18 and 34 are 81 plus 37,000, whatever that is. I don't combine them. So that, number one, there's a lot. Number two is the folks that are taking advantage of the post 9/11 GI Bill are veterans that are post 9/11, if you will. So a lot of them are the millennials as well. But the fact is you're right. There's a lot of hiring managers are going to say, I want the millennials, and so go get them. And my response to that is those millennials are probably in school right now. Those veterans, they're in school right now. Any given semester, we have over 500,000 veterans in school. There are some out there that are the geezers, if you will, but a good chunk of them are certainly post 9/11 and certainly recent ones. I mean, when you have 250 to 300,000 folks transitioning out every single year, there's a rich crop of folks that you can take advantage of. Yes, ma'am. I sure hope she doesn't call me old as well.
I'm right behind you. Hi, my name's Andrea Wellington from USPTO, and I think we've been in the news more than anybody. And I am a hiring manager. We have a program for veterans, specifically pathways, that we're having a hard time attracting people. It's a co-op program because you have to have an engineering or science degree. So we're having a hard time actually getting veterans into this program. Well, for instance, this last class, we were trying to get at least 16 minimum. We would have taken more. We were able only to fill one position out of over 800 applicants. So we have the opposite problem of not getting enough vets. What do you recommend that we do to assist us with this particular type of problem?
Recognize the issue and fix it. And here's what I mean by that. I mean, veterans graduating from college, and I go around to colleges and universities because I'm responsible for the GI Bill, and I do commencement speeches and so on and so forth. I will tell you that most veterans graduating from college today, they're not having a big problem getting a job. They are being recognized. Number one, it's companies and so on want to hire veterans. I mean, that's for whatever good reason. And when I go and talk to private sector companies, I tell them, don't hire a veteran because it makes you feel good. Hire a veteran because it makes good business sense. Here's where it makes good business sense for you to be thinking about. If you were to take a veteran, and you talked about Pathways, which is a college degree program, and you say, well, I only could fill one of my jobs out of 16. Internship, but they got to be college graduates, right? Seniors in college. And you're asking them to be attracted to the government. My response to that is part of what I tell people is we have a philosophy in this country of two different ways. The military philosophy is that we hire and then we train them, right? So you find that kid from Nebraska or the inner city, and they have whatever good attributes you think that kid may have, and you send that kid to boot camp and then you train him up. And 18 months later, I'm an old Navy guy, that kid from Nebraska or the inner city is a fire control technician on a destroyer in the middle of the Atlantic. That kid can do any one of your jobs, period. In the private sector and in the government sector, in most cases, they have a philosophy of train, then hire. I want college graduates, and I want them in IT, and I want them in cybersecurity, and I want them to have this and that, right? Turn that around, and if you're not getting the applicants that you want from a veteran pool, because those seniors are not applying for those jobs, part of it could be how good is your outreach and not. Steve talked about my missive. I send out these missives, and it goes to about 560,000 emails whenever I send one out. So if you have a really cool program, send me a note, we might be able to do it. But you might also want to turn that around. If a veteran has post 9/11 GI Bill benefits, and your agency has considered doing sort of a tuition assistance program. When I was at HHS, we had a tuition assistance program, and it cost us money. I mean, we would pay money. These are veterans that if you designed a program such that they could come to work for you, as well as perhaps 3/4 time, if you will, and then be able to go to school using their post 9/11 GI Bill benefits, no cost to you. And you set up a program like that, you probably will have someone that will be loyal to you for life. Because that's the nature of the way veterans think. And so my only point is take the problem, look at it, and how can we be creative otherwise? And that's one solution to be able to do that. Anybody else? I think I've run over Steve's hovering, so.
We've got people whose stomachs are growling. And,
Sorry.
And what do we do about that? So I wish that most of my professors were as inspiring as Mr. Coy. Thank you so much for joining us, and the advice. College Recruiter, one of the things that we are working on, and if anybody has ideas or wants to be part of it, in 2015, we are going to be devoting a fair amount of resources to helping employers better engage with veterans. And one of the ways that we're going to be doing it is we're going to try to take kind of a carrot approach rather than a stick approach. So what we want to do is highlight employers that are doing a really good job of hiring veterans and let those employers tell their stories. And, sorry, wait, on DCA or
Pardon me?
are you going to DCA?
Yes,
Good luck.
be in Atlanta.
You'll need it. So if you have a great veteran program, new, old, big, small, you have an interesting story to tell, talk to us because we want to highlight that. What we're hoping to do is to inspire other employers to say, hey, if they can do that, so can we.